Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the 1936 film, has been on my to-watch list for about 1.5 decades, roughly. And I feel like it was about 2012 when I fell in love with Sweeney Todd, and I always meant to check out this version. I've seen a couple of other versions, and I finally got around to watching it. Was it worth it? Well, it's a nice way to view the story, but it definitely wouldn't be my top recommendation. This was released, as I said, 1936. It's directed by George King, and it's written by Frederick, Hayward and H.F. Maltby, based on the play by George Dibdin-Pitt, which I haven't read. I haven't read the screenplay. I'd be quite interested to see that. And, of course, it's based on the story by Thomas Becket-Prest. And Sweeney Todd is my number one all-time favourite film, partly because it's amazing, partly because there's a lot of nostalgia and a lot of memories there for me with that film. So I went into this knowing I would never love it as much as Tim Burton's film. That's my favourite version of Sweeney Todd, my all-time favourite film. But I still went in with an open mind, and it's fine. It's okay. If you're a fan of the story already, I'd say absolutely give this a go. It's a nice enough way to rediscover the characters, but with a slightly different angle. And if you've read the book, I'd also suggest checking it out. There are some little differences in this film. And then there are some differences again between this and Burton's film, if you've seen that one. I won't go into too much detail about the differences, but the basic premise is Sweeney Todd is a barber who kills people. Mrs Lovatt has a pie shop. You can join the dots with what happens to the dead bodies and the pie shop that's desperately in need for more customers and more meat. And we also have the character of Johanna. And Johanna here is played by Eve Lister. We also have Todd Slaughter as Sweeney Todd, which is a brilliant name for that role, and Stella Rho as Mrs Lovatt, who's actually called, according to IMDb and Wikipedia, Lovatt is spelled Lovatt, whereas the actual character is Lovett, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't know if that was intentional or a mistake with the script, but I just thought it was worth noting. And in general, the story is fine. The pacing is good. It starts off with a barber telling the story of Sweeney Todd, which I quite like. I like the story within the story. I thought that worked quite well. And then we have the very bloodthirsty, murderous story thereafter, and some interesting enough victims. The character of Sweeney Todd is fine. Obviously, for me, Johnny Depp is Sweeney Todd. I can't see anybody else in the role. I do watch clips of other people playing Sweeney Todd, and they're all absolutely fine, but obviously with such a strong love of that particular character, played by Johnny Depp. And Helena Bonham Carter will always be Mrs Lovatt to me, but the role here, the character here, absolutely fine as well. So I guess, in a way, it's not really fair of me to have watched this, fair on the film, of me to have watched this after falling in love with Burton's Sweeney Todd, because it was never going to be as good. Never, ever. But that being said, it's okay. It's not the most comprehensive way to enjoy the story. It's definitely not as detailed as the book itself is. Definitely not as detailed as any other versions that I've seen. It's quite simple and straightforward in that regard. It's just over an hour. And usually, I advocate shorter films. I think a film should not be any longer than it needs to be to tell the story, but I feel like this one could have benefited from at least another 15-20 minutes. Certain characters needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. But as I said, if you're a fan of the story, then absolutely give it a go. If you haven't seen Burton's film, I'd say, well, it doesn't really matter if you watch this one or that one first. I think whichever way you do it, I think you'll still prefer Burton's, unless you hate musicals, in which case you might prefer this version. There's also a 2006 version, which is pretty decent as well, as far as I can remember. I haven't seen that one in quite a while, but it's not bad. If you're an existing fan of Sweeney Todd, I'd say the 1936 version is worth checking out. If you're not a fan, then I doubt you'd enjoy this very much. But if you're new to Sweeney Todd, my advice would actually be to read it first if you can get hold of the book. It's really interesting. And then watching maybe this version, but certainly Burton's, because I hold it in such high esteem. I think it's absolutely perfect. As I said, my all-time favourite film for numerous reasons. And with that in mind, Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the 1936 version, was never going to be a favourite, but it's fine. Definite room for improvement with the narrative. Some of the characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but ultimately, I guess it's not bad.